Hi everyone, this video is a defense on abortion. Now, I kind of feel like this should be irrelevant and unnecessary in this day and age, and to some extent it is true that in Australia, at least in my chunk of Australia, abortions are readily available and politically supported. However, I still find, and certainly on the internet, I found lots and lots of people who honestly believe that abortion should be illegal, or at least thought of as being immoral. And so I thought I would canvass what I think is the best argument for the right to abortion. Now, this is not new, and it's not my argument. In fact, it was made by a woman called Judith Thompson, who wrote an essay called A Defense of Abortion in 1971. That is 43 years ago this argument was advanced, and I honestly have not heard a single counter-argument that does it justice. So, first of all, what is this argument? Well, it involves a bit of a thought experiment. So the idea is that imagine that, and I'll actually reframe it in a way which I think is even stronger than it was originally stated 43 years ago. Imagine you have a child. Imagine this child becomes sick because you beat the child. Imagine that you beat your own child. It's a 2-year-old child to the point of liver failure. So you've assaulted your own child and you've damaged their liver, and they need to have a liver donated to them. And let's say, for the sake of this hypothetical thought experiment, the only liver which is a match for that child is yours. There are no other livers in the entire world which this child could have, and without this liver, let's say, for the sake of this thought experiment, that child will die. The injury that was inflicted upon the child was at your hand. Now, we'll set aside whatever punishment you're likely to have for beating the child. In our society, the worst that you could possibly get for that is a murder sentence and be sentenced to life in prison. We'll set that aside. So consider the situation. The doctors say this child is going to die if they do not receive your liver. And let's say they don't even need all of your liver. The child only needs a little bit of your liver, and you can survive quite happily afterwards. Now, the question is, are you morally obliged to donate your liver to the child? Think about it. Seriously think about it. A better way of framing it is, do you have the right to refuse? Should you have, in our society, the legal right, the moral right, to say no? This is my liver, and for whatever other sins I've done, I should be punished, but you do not have the right to take my liver from me against my will. Now, my argument, and I think my answer to that is that absolutely you have the right. As I said, you will be punished for whatever actions you've taken prior to that. So the fact that you've assaulted your child, you deserve punishment for. But it in no way means that the state then has the right to take your liver, or even a portion of your liver, from you to donate to your child. It doesn't matter that you caused the injury. It doesn't matter that it's your child. It doesn't matter that you're the only person who could possibly donate. You should have an absolute right to say, no, it is my liver and I do not consent to donating it. Now, I'm not saying that nobody should judge you as a bad person. I think on some level, depending on what the risks are, you may well be considered a bad person to not have done that. And yes, you caused the injury to this child. And so in some sense you might feel, and other people may reasonably feel, that you have an obligation to this child. But that obligation does not, and should never, override your right to bodily autonomy to say no. How is this related to abortion? Well, so the argument in defense of abortion essentially says that this is exactly analogous to the abortion question. So you have a human being who, through no fault of their own, can only survive within the mother's womb. Now, we may argue whether it's a human being or not, but I actually think that the strength of this argument is that you can assert that it's a human being totally, and it still follows you should be able to abort that child, or not child, or zygote, or whatever. Through no fault of their own, you've brought this child into being, and they are, the only place they can survive is in your womb. The bodily autonomy argument basically says that you always, absolutely, every person absolutely has the right to control what happens with their body. So at any point, that person should have the right to say, I do not consent to have this child in my body anymore. This child does not have my consent to take the nutrients and the warmth and the shelter of my womb. Now, I think society is absolutely fine to judge that person and say, well, that was immoral of you to deliberately bring a child into this world, to deliberately conceive this child and then to turn around and change your mind. Absolutely. But I think that the person should absolutely have the right to have an abortion anyway. This is similar to the way in which abortion generally is not... an abortion that is performed by the mother, i.e. a backyard abortion, whatever, is generally not illegal in many countries, even though a medically performed one is. Because generally speaking, we do acknowledge that people should have the right to do whatever they want with their bodies. And it's only when there is medical assistance being provided that we start to get a bit kind of iffy around that. Now, that's not true in all countries. Some countries, they would criminalise that as entirely. And so I think this is the single strongest argument for abortion. I've not yet heard a reasonable counter-argument. All the counter-arguments I've heard are things like, well, it's not quite the same situation, and or you owe this child, because it's your child, because you brought them into being, you owe them a debt. And I think that is true in one sense, but I honestly don't think that, I don't think that moral obligation you feel that you might have towards this child that overrides your right to bodily autonomy. Now, I realise it's a little incongruous for a man to be putting forward strong arguments about abortion, given that I will never be faced with that situation. And the only reason I really wanted to put this forward is, one, because there's a lot of men making stupid arguments against abortion, and secondly, I'm really only reiterating somebody else's argument that they made 43 years ago that I think hasn't got enough attention. So really, don't take this as, some man thinks he knows what he's talking about. Take this as, here is a fantastically well thought out argument that has not got the airing that it should. I would love to hear counter-arguments against it. First up, I don't accept any kind of religious arguments against it, purely because I think that there is a much higher rule that religion should not be able to be imposed upon people against their will. So if you're religious and you believe that abortions are wrong, that's fine, don't have an abortion. I'm completely for that. Just like I feel that if you're religious and you think that gay people shouldn't get married, then don't do any gay marriages. That's fine. But I don't think that your views should be imposed upon other people. And especially not I think in general, but especially not in countries like Australia, where explicitly we have a secular government. So in that sense, I think all religious arguments are off the table unless you're living in a religious theocracy. Apart from that, I think the question of whether the child, unborn child, fetus, zygote, whatever, will feel pain and suffering, I actually think is not particularly relevant. I think it makes people feel better about having had an abortion, and I think that's valuable, because I don't personally believe in judging people for, having abortions, but I don't think it actually makes much of a difference to the bodily autonomy argument. And similarly, the whole developmental thing about whether or not it's a person, whether it's a fetus is a person or not, I think these are, I don't believe. I actually think that, there are gradations of people, and as the more you develop, the more person you become. That's why, children have less rights under the law as adults. And I think similarly, if you stretch it back before birth, that these clumps of cells should have very little legal rights. But even that, I think, is a sidelight, that even if it was a completed whole person, your child, as I put in the argument, I still think you have the right to refuse them accommodation within your womb. So there you go. That's my defence of abortion. If you've got any great ideas about why the mistakes I may have made in this, or if you've got a better argument against it, then please let me know. Thank you for watching. Bye.